welcome everybody to another episode of the Game Zen podcast. You are joined by our regular hosts, myself, Atty.
I'm Evan.
And I'm Shashank.
Cool. That pause is getting shorter and shorter between every episode.
Well, I think last week you introduced everyone, so I was a bit unexpected there.
No, I didn't. Juan and fucking Eric introduced themselves, I'm pretty sure. If I recall correctly.
There's definitely one episode where you introduced everyone at least.
I think so.
There was one episode. I was experimenting to see if it made anything less awkward. I think that it just kind of lended itself that way. But welcome to the Game Zen podcast. For those of you who don't know, the Game Zen is the game development group at the University of Alberta in Canada, and we make, talk, and play games. Where we often spend times in hosting and organizing game jams, developing generally across the server. We also talk about games on a regular basis, discussing development, design, writing, programming, all that good stuff. And we also like playing games. We have our own Pixelmon server, which is currently dying. Maybe it might get revived soon.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, if you're interested in joining and being part of the discussion, feel free to head over to thegamesden.ca. That's thegamesden.ca. You can scroll down and join our Discord where all the activity is happening. Other than that, this is is a new update that the Games Den podcast will now be once every 2 weeks instead of weekly. We just thought it'd be better and help us plan a little bit further and get more guests on the podcast as well. So yeah, that's a new thing. Other than that, moving on into the main part and getting announcements out of the way, I have a question for everybody. How are you dealing with this heat? Because it's fucking hot.
Not well.
Yeah. Luckily my house has AC, which is a godsend, right? But like every time I step outside, I forget how hot it is outside because I've been spending all my time inside. I just open the door. I'm like, oh, it's summer.
Oh, it's summer.
Yeah.
How about you, Evan?
Yeah, it's been a struggle because no AC at my place.
Yeah, same.
So I just have the window in my room open constantly, which is nice most times, except for when the construction workers decide, hey, it's time to come back and revive Dr. Hammer.
Revive Dr. Hammer, yeah.
Yeah. So there's always a bit of give and take for me.
He will be back.
He will be back.
Maybe. Hopefully not.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. I have a singular fan in my room that's kind of keeping me cool. I've turned it off with the podcast duration so it doesn't make the brr noise. Other than that, we have an AC in our house, but every single time we turn it on, like after 5 minutes of its use, the circuit breaker flips, flips, and then you're like shit, and then entire area of the house has no current going through. And we tested this out with different possibilities. We tried connecting it to the same outlet where the washing machine and dryer are, so that we get some more, voltage supply from that particular outlet. Doesn't work. Apparently, ACs take more voltage than the washer and a dryer. So that's a thing. Huh. We tried plugging in an extension cord outside the house in our garage and bringing it all the way into our window, and then through the window, and then connecting it to that extension box. Doesn't work. So we've been heating up in this house quite a bit. Back in India, what I used to do was really cheeky because it was just get plus 40 over there.
Yeah.
And my room used to have no windows or anything that was inside the house. I used to take water and toss it on, spray it on the floor, and then just watch the heat from the floor escape in the water as it evaporates and would cool the floor. And that was lie on the floor. That's
pretty smart. Yeah.
I definitely didn't take that from a really, really terrible Reddit thread. So Eh.
Yeah.
Aside from dying of heat strokes, me and Evan mostly, and not Shashank, because you have an AC, you privileged bastard.
Yep.
What have you guys been playing over the last 2 weeks?
Evan, want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So recently I've gotten back into Risk of Rain 2, which I don't know if either of you are aware of. It's a 3D roguelite. Oh, it's really fun, dude. I love that game so much.
I love the
And
soundtrack.
yeah, it's really cool seeing how it's evolved because Risk of Rain 1 was the exact same game but a 2D platformer. So just seeing everything in that new light after 2 released, it was so cool. And it's I just finished unlocking every character that's currently in right now because it is still early access. Yeah, it's great. Like every character feels super different, and it's a lot less based off of the items you get through a run rather than just the character you choose at the beginning, which I personally enjoy. And it's very easy to get very strong,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
so it's a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, roguelike 3D games are a fairly rare commodity.
Mhm.
Mostly dungeon crawlers or like stuff of that sort.
Yeah.
Is Path of Exile also like generated level design, or is it pre-generated?
I think their dungeons are randomly generated, but they have pre-generated areas to lead into them.
Yeah. So like patchwork system. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
That's really interesting. Risk of Rain. There was a small boom in our community, more like this computing science community, like in earlier in January actually, and then it kind of subsided. I didn't know it was in early access. I thought it was already released.
No, Risk of Rain 2, they're still constantly updating it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new character that should be coming out pretty soon, who I think is like a gunslinger outlaw kind of deal. Yeah. Also, cool thing about that game is, unlike most roguelites, there's no proper win state. It will just keep going for as long as you play. So there, you can have like 3-hour runs. It's quite fun.
It's high noon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I'm always interested in procedurally generated games. That's like a big point of interest for me personally. I might check it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
How about you, Shashank?
I haven't been playing a whole lot. But I did play a little bit more Metal Gear Solid 5. I finished the first half of the story, and it's a Kojima game, right? You know what I'm talking about. It's
Is your Phantom painting? Out of curiosity.
all the time. Yeah, but like, because I'm a big fan of using surrealism in storytelling, right? I wrote a play that used it a lot, and I'm currently working on a short film that uses it a lot. I get why people don't like it though, because it's easy for me to sit on my high throne and be like, "Oh, it's the highest art form. If you do not get it, it's simply too intelligent for you." No. if your art isn't conveying the message you want to get across, it's not doing its job, right? So I think that kind of leads into Death Stranding.
But first, I wanted to ask you real quick, but like, what do you think is a Kojima game? Like, what aspects and elements of the game make it a Kojima game for you?
Okay. So you've got Hollywood actors, first off. Right?
Yep.
You've got stories that don't really make sense, but are very over the top. You've got really out there concepts, and especially the names. Which I
What's wrong with naming your female NPC Quiet, dude? And giving her a skinny suit so that she can only breathe in water or some shit like that. It's like,
It's you play that game and you're like, God damn it, Kojima. um, yeah. So I personally haven't played Death Stranding. My brother-in-law has, and he very much thoroughly enjoyed that game. He doesn't usually play big games, right? He doesn't play stuff that you need to sink hundreds of hours into, but he 100%ed Death Stranding. That's how much he liked it.
Okay.
Okay.
But I know you hear on the internet how much people really dislike that game.
I think it's a very ambivalent game. Like, not ambivalent, sorry. It's a very opinionated, divisive game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Divisive game, yeah.
There's
There's people who love it, people who don't like it.
Yeah. Have either of you ever played it?
Yeah. Yeah, actually. I've been playing a little bit of it last week too. So I've got it on release. Because I had a friend who's coming over from Toronto, and we wanted to play the game together because he's a huge Kojima fan.
Yeah.
So he said, "Okay, yeah, come over to Toronto, and we'll have a Death Stranding night." And we played through the first like 4 hours of the game, which 2 hours of it was cutscenes, maybe. And then like 2 hours of just like of walking. Like here's the thing, right? As a cinematic experience, Death Stranding is so fucking good. Like the animations, the cameras, and like the actual direction of it. You can credit Kojima all you want for that, I think, because he's the game's director, and he's the author like behind, I guess, the Kojima Productions, right?
Yeah.
So like all credit to him in his experience, like as a director, like it shows like this is definitely a cinematic experience. The first time like you walk into an open field and they just start playing like this lyricized English music, right? Like almost like indie pop music, and you're like, damn, that music is sick, and that camera angle is sick, and there's like nothing on my HUD, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So from a cinematic perspective, I think all of Kojima's learnings since Metal Gear Solid, up to Death Stranding is evident. Like I played through MGS5, and I can definitely see an improvement in direction from MGS5 personally.
Right.
There's a lot less of those. Well, I guess the shot, the particular Kojima shot where the camera's in front of your face and like slowly rotates around the character's face. You know what I'm talking about? The classic Kojima shot. You know, right? The camera like tilts as it shows the character performing an action around his face. Like that shot has been improved. I am happy to announce. But like from a game standpoint, I would rather go out and hike.
Right.
And I think it was an opportune game to play during quarantine because it kind of gave you that feeling of exploration that you get when you're hiking out in the open, like in the wild. But I went hiking recently and I came back to play this game and I'm like, I'd rather be outside. And I'm not a big fan of like horror games generally. And Death Stranding, let me just say, it made me scared, not to the point where I was like afraid of whatever it is that was chasing me. More of like it built tension too fast at times. Like the tension, like the way it kind of built tension is like, oh shit, it's gonna rain. That's it. Fuck, everybody hide. Like everybody fucking scuttle right now. That's kind of how it felt. And I'm almost definitely a fan of when you have built like tension that's building up for a bit, and then you get the climax of tension. This game just like whoop, and you're like, ah. Yeah. So Death Stranding, very interesting game. I don't want to play it any further. mostly because eating bugs to regain your health is weird. Also because having a very dedicated mechanic for peeing is weird. And
Okay.
not quite my. I don't question when my Skyrim character goes 400 hours looking in the washroom. Right, that's fine with me. That's my fantasy. In my fantasy, you don't need to excrete our wastes. It goes out through our sweat or whatever the fuck. Right, I don't really care. Like, when in D&D do you announce I'm gonna go take a shit? See ya. Like, you never do that, right? And I don't know how I feel about there being a dedicated mechanic to empty your bladder, and like, it just doesn't sit right with me for some reason.
Yeah.
So, and other than that, it's just like a weight simulator 2020, right? That's basically what the game is, mechanically. I do like the social strand system, is what it's called. I think it's a creative way to make use of online play.
Right.
I think there's a bit of a little narrative dissonance in the way it functions, but it still does a decent job at making use of the innovative mechanic. It's a very innovative game, don't get me wrong. Mechanically, it's very innovative, but I think that it fails in a lot of places as a game.
Right.
But I think it's definitely one of the most innovative AAA games to come out in recent history. I can talk about more Death Stranding, but I want to move on because I just wanted to move on a little bit and try to keep it going. Unless I want to talk more about Death Stranding, I can go on for Death Stranding for a bit.
Well, I mean, okay, so you talked about it being an innovative game, right?
Yeah.
I guess that segues very nicely into our talk and make sections. Mostly our talk section, which is the opposite, non-innovative AAA games.
AKA every other AAA game in the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Almost.
A lot of them tend not to take risks. First off, let's define, I guess, what sort of things do we count as non-innovative?
Well, I think the general consensus is that when you're investing like 90 million to like 150 million into a game's development, like at that point you're basically you're creating something that's going to be fairly long, right? It's a longer project, maybe 30 hours plus at least. And then at that point, like, with the content that you're creating, you are trying to make the game let's see, I'll classify it this way, right? Non-innovative is a word. So what does innovation really mean, and especially specifically in the sphere of games?
Right.
I think when we're really talking about innovation is that we're talking about really treading new territory and experimenting with the way humans interact with the game's interface. Right? What is the interaction between the player and the system? And that is a space where innovation takes place. Even things like the way the art, kind of reflects off of the water or whatever, like that kind of stuff is also innovative in its own way. For example, in What Remains of Edith Finch, which is an indie game, but What Remains of Edith Finch, the text that kind of displays as you walking through this home pops up like on the objects that you're walking past, right? And the text kind of is on that object, and that's a new way for like to have interface with text, because you are actually physically reading a diary, and that's kind of how the game takes place. And so that's innovative, right? That's super innovative because that's taking the idea that you're reading a diary and making it literal within the game's interaction space. Right. That's innovative. You know what isn't innovative? Something that has been done before and is proven to work. The Pokemon games are not very innovative. We talked about this before. Skill trees are not very innovative.
Right.
They are effectively tried and true systems that work, like that work. And I think that AAA games don't tend to take risks because they're investing so much money in development that they can't afford to fail.
Mm.
Which is why they want to try something that's already been done before, maybe with a little bit of a twist on it here or there. Um, Now I want to. So does that answer like kind of what non-innovative is defined as in
Yeah.
terms in this particular context?
I feel like that gives a pretty good look at it.
Yeah. It's the space in between the player and the game. If the player and the game are two sides, of the interaction space, everything in between is the interaction space, and that is where innovation happens. Particularly in the way the user engages with the game itself. Um, and like everything is a part of this cumulative innovation. Mechanics can be innovative, art can be innovative, right? Sound design can be innovative. All those things can be innovative, but it's just a matter of which elements you pick and choose. And the reason we're saying AAA games aren't innovative, and that's kind of I guess the topic generally, is because there isn't enough innovation. All AAA games try to do something different, right? That's what differentiates them from the competitors.
Right.
So Spider-Man PS4 will be like, this swinging is innovative, and that's a big enough change for movement in an open world game to have it be sort of innovative.
Right.
Ghost of Tsushima, right, also has skill trees, but the way that game is innovative is by having completely diegetic UI within the open world and having barely any HUD. That's how it is innovative, right? So all AAA games try to do this small thing that's innovative, and then you're like, okay, yeah. I probably used the word innovative like an innovative number of times. Let's step away from the word a little bit. But there are games that don't do anything different. One such example was Last of Us 2. Like that's a game that doesn't do anything different.
Right.
It's the same old, same old. A lot of AAA games, Jedi Fallen Order, I've been playing that game recently, and it's not very different in the way it does things. The skill tree is kind of borrowed from Skyrim. It feels like the way it kind of does that, and it's taking things that work and then just doing it a tad bit differently. Yeah, you have lightsabers and the Force, the game mechanics. They're all essentially the same though, right? Because like they're all variants on the same mechanics that you've seen before in the past, like pull push, stagger, chop, dashes, leaps. All of that stuff has been done before. Like there's nothing new about that. We've been doing that for the past 20 years in AAA, and even in indie. Like AAA games lack the risk taking. Like for example, I don't necessarily want to coach Jonathan Blow on this, but like Braid when it first came out, that kind of skyrocketed the indie revolution. Like that game, the mechanics turn back time effectively, right? And that's kind of the main mechanic, and that's. But it's innovative not because of just the mechanic, but also because it twists the narrative completely. And when you look at it from a little bit elevated lens, you realize that you're the villain. Spoilers for a 15-year-old game, but that's kind of why I think indie games do so much more innovation in the interaction space. It's because they need to take the risk to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be different.
Yeah.
In a very competitive market.
Mm-hmm.
AAA games have money, man. They can advertise on a bus side. Sorry to interrupt. They can advertise it in the bus side. They can advertise it in the PS Plus store, like the front page, right? They have the money to do that. Indie games don't. Like they need publishers' help to get their word across.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying.
I feel like a part of that comes down to expectations. I know we've talked about fan expectations in the past, but like some of the great AAA titles that we've been talking about that have innovated have only done relatively small things. Big in terms of AAA, but small in terms of what indie games do, right?
Mhm.
And I think that comes down to expectations. People expect AAA titles. They'll pick up one AAA title and be like, "Oh, I understand this system because I've played this other AAA title." It's more cookie cutter to an extent.
Yeah, it's the same mold, right? Like I said, it's been tried and tested, and therefore it just works. Like everyone knows what a skill tree is.
Yeah.
Like that's something that's just transferred over ever since, like Oblivion or whatever before that. And like you have, and of course you have stuff like open world towers. Like the way
Yeah.
Ubisoft does them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that shit's like the most like easy AAA like borrowed map exploration mechanic ever, but it works.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild also borrowed from it heavily, right?
Mhm.
And like the reason why it's hard to innovate in that space is mostly because like so Ghost of Tsushima as a AAA title with Sucker Punch. The way they do open world exploration is that you need to upgrade a certain outfit to increase the range of how much fog of war you clear as you move.
Right.
That's how they do the exploration mechanic. It sucks. Like it does suck because you need to like keep looking at the world map to figure out if you're exploring at just the right amount of distance so that your fog of war is on the edge of what's already cleared, so that you can get perfect clearance of the map if you're a perfectionist like or completionist like myself.
Yeah.
And so that is something that it's hard to innovate on that stuff. Like it really is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't put their budget into trying to do that.
Yeah,
right?
that's also true.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've sorry, go ahead, Evan.
I just think part of it also comes down to how obsessed people are with sequels. Because when you're making a sequel for a game, it's guaranteed to be less innovative, pretty much.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say it's impossible not to innovate on a sequel. Like Majora's Mask is very innovative compared to Ocarina of Time. But still, when you look at The Last of Us 2, like we brought up earlier, it's using largely the same mechanics as Last of Us 1 because that's what players were expecting.
What are you talking about? We can go prone now, man.
Oh yeah. Big changes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, there's a lot going into why these large studios, they just don't need to make something new, just something that looks a bit different.
Yeah. And I guess if you're releasing yearly, it makes sense. You need a boilerplate that you can just smack on a different story to.
Like, but these AAA games, when you invest 90 to 150 million into these games, like maybe less, a little bit more, you're investing into a 3 to 4 year dev cycle, maybe even 5 years of dev cycle. It's not a yearly release. Last of Us 2 came out 5 years after Last of Us 1.
Right.
Am I counting that right?
I think it might be like 7.
7? Yeah, right? I think.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And Last of Us 1 itself was already, like, they worked on it for like a decade itself.
That was a PS3 title, wasn't it? Last of Us 1?
Yes. It was.
Yeah,
It
it was a PS3.
title. Yeah, end of life title, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that, it's been a while. And obviously you can tell by the detail of the game, like the way the physics works and all that other stuff, that there's a lot of effort and love put in and a lot of crunch put into that game. Like it's obvious. I was watching a friend stream it, and like I can see where they put the effort in, obviously, to make things as realistic as possible. At that point, just play Bandersnatch, man. Like, I don't know. At least Bandersnatch has choices. Like it's rough for me to see that because as amazing as a story, that game is, like it has a goal, right? Like a lot of these AAA titles have a goal to convey a story, often at times. And creative directors like have a vision, and they often like push that and kind of pitch that and get everybody on board with the vision, and then like pursue it. And that's fine. Like everyone's free to make the games they want. That's what's awesome about art. But at the same time, like when you're developing with so much money and you can invest so much resources and revenue and human effort into making your vision come true, I think that comes with a little bit of responsibility to push the medium forward as well.
Right.
I think, in my opinion. And again, this is just an opinion that's been guiding me because I've been in the indie space such a long time. Where I see indie developers pushing the boundaries so much, taking tropes, putting them on top of their heads, like taking mechanics, making it totally innovative. Baba Is You is such a fucking wild game when you think about it.
Yeah.
And it pushes everything you understand about logic to the next level, right? That's how you push the medium forward, by really toying with everything that isn't boilerplate.
Yeah.
Yeah, my main point here is that with great power comes great responsibility, as my favorite Uncle Ben used to tell me.
Yeah. So I guess we can talk about because the indie games are smaller games, I guess they can devote more of their time to, trying out innovative things. Do you think we'll see a shift in the market towards smaller games?
Ooh, this has been a topic of heated debate on Twitter since a very long time. Yeah, that's true. What isn't?
Yeah.
So there's a trend in AAA games, right? They often have to be certain amount of hours in length, right? That's kind of what the expectation is.
Yeah.
And do games need to be? So here's my concern: with the next generation of consoles and the next generation of engines, the amount of effort you need to put in to generate assets, to generate content, and to program and to build a game is going to increase.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make a high quality, 4K, blah 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 blah, like AAA title, you're going to need more hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
Because with that increase in spec comes an increase in effort. Because making games is hard. Computers were never meant to play games. That's not why they were made. So we have this future that's coming up very close with the next generation.
Yeah.
And I think we all have seen the articles, right, about crunch and everything else. AAA development, as I think is an article that I shared with you guys, with Sean Later from Sony, ex-Sony executive, I think. He voiced his opinion on this, and he said that, AAA games, and people on Twitter go wild about this anyway, AAA games are unsustainable. They're unsustainable to make. We have all heard the news about Naughty Dog. We've all heard the news about, BioWare, most AAA studios actually in the world, with the burnout that happens with every release cycle, and with people leaving the games industry as employees at a very young age. The games industry lifespan, the career lifespan, is I think 10 years. It's small. 6 to 10 years, I think.
It's abysmal, really. Comparing it to other tech fields.
Yeah,
it's really garbage.
It's awful.
It's really garbage.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get paid from being in tech, man, go join a corporate or a startup company. You get a lot of money there.
Yeah.
Games are not where it's at. Even though we're making $90 to $150 million games, and it's one of the highest grossing tech industries in the world.
Yeah.
It's just not long term.
It's such a weird like toss up. I can't wrap my head around this. Like, how does the games industry make so much fucking money, but our employees are underpaid and ununionized?
Well,
I don't
it really
understand.
just comes down to like they take advantage of the fact that the games industry is much more of an artistic field than any like corporate tech job. So you can take advantage of people having artistic visions and having passion for what they're working on.
Yeah.
And then that's how you get crunch. That's how you get underpaid employees. That's how you get everything.
Yeah.
It's just people see like game dev as a dream job, and then they're not willing to work for what they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a dark reality. I think
Yep.
I had a conversation with someone who's graduating out of high school right now, my old high school, and she was just asking me, she was like, "Yo, I really like playing games, and I want to at some point make my own games," and I didn't know what to tell her.
Yeah.
I genuinely sat there in front of the mic for like maybe 2 minutes just thinking about what the right thing to say is, because I don't want to leave her with a false expectation of what the games industry is.
Yeah.
Because it's a fucking tough industry.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy to get into. It's not easy to break into. It's not easy to work in. Some people are having a great time. A lot of people are having a really bad time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can, in my right consciousness, recommend it unless you really have that energy and that life fuel to burn into it. It's a fire that takes a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
Out of you. And that's just my understanding talking to people who've been in game dev, right? I haven't worked for a game dev company, like a big company before, but making games is hard. I've made games. Making games is hard. Talk to people who work in AAA, talk to people who work in indie. Making games is hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, it kind of fuels into this larger discussion where making shorter games, I think, generally is maybe a better strategy. I don't think people have the time to invest in a 120-hour story,
Right.
unless right. If you're developing an open world game, understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Like open world games generally lend themselves to exploration, and so you want to spend time in that. Got it. If you have a linear narrative storyline, man, we just like flat level designed, right? Why is that? Why is that taking 40 hours to complete?
Yeah.
Yep.
And with the next generation, where making assets is going to be harder, pumping out, learning the new engine is going to be harder, blah, blah, blah. Like, in that market, like, shorter games will cut down dev time, hence will cut down work, hence will help make healthier employees, hopefully. That's a big stretch. Next thing you know, you have, like, fucking, the men in the suit at the top going, like, oh yeah, we want this game shipped in a year, and you're like, buddy. But like boilerplates work. I think for games like FIFA, NBA, like those sports games, like boilerplates is great. Like keep those. They cut dev time so much. So coming back to kind of the topic about shorter games, I personally think it's a good idea. I want to ask your opinion before I kind of go into the discussion about the weird dichotomy and the contradiction between what we're saying.
I think it's easy.
No, go for it.
Okay. I think it's easy to want to say like, oh, I think I want smaller games. I want more innovative stuff. But you're still losing out on the AAA experience at that point. Which is huge because they're AAA, they sell a lot for a reason, right? Personally, I do want smaller games. I want experiences that are built around the specific number of hours that they need, instead of just padding the runtime with copy paste quests and like find the Korok seeds like I'm doing. Because a lot of the really solid indie games that I've played recently, like Untitled Goose Game, you play that game and it is the same quality, the same solid content the entire way throughout, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Yeah.
I've been playing Ghost of Tsushima. Sorry, Evan, you wanted to go first?
Yeah, sure. I do think games need to get smaller. I think it's healthier for both the devs and the players to not spend so much time either making or playing a game, a singular experience. Yeah, it makes so much sense to make a game. I'm a big fan of roguelites because they're very expandable based off of how much you want to play them. Like the runtime for a roguelite is as much as you want it to be, and I think that they remain relatively small in what they are as like a core thing. But there's so many different ways you can combine the different systems within it,
Right.
that it makes them the ideal almost, where is purely a player will not feel like they've missed out because they stopped playing.
Mm.
And I feel like with a lot of these large open world titles, that's what ends up happening is you play for 10 hours and it's like, oh, I need to take a break, but then you're missing out on all this extra content that they made. But why are we deving content? You know, I saw a video recently on Breath of the Wild talking about the Korok seeds. You know, there's something like 900 or whatever.
Yep.
You're not intended to find every one. That everyone's supposed to find like a different set. But then why are we deving in a way that we're making so much content that no one is ever going to see? That it's intended that a player is only going to get 100 of these 900 objects. Why is that a sensible decision?
Yeah.
It's yeah, smaller games I think are just what everyone needs.
See, it's also
That's
really
good.
interesting that you say that because, like, I know there are people who like love the long storylines and the long content. Like Ghost of Tsushima, as I was saying, I've put in, I want to say 30 hours. I'm in Act 3 right now. And like, you know, I'd be fine if the game ended where I am right now. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have that much time to finish it. Like I've been struggling to find time recently. Like I really have to play the game. I haven't touched the game in the last 3 days.
Yeah.
And so I'd be fine if it just ended like where I am currently. And then I can wait for a sequel, you know.
Yeah.
But the people have like contained storylines that they want to tell. And I appreciate the amount of content there is. Like I appreciate like the side quests. They're very nice and very aesthetically kind of harmonious with the game. But I still feel like if the same game just cut out the entire last part, I'd be happy with how much I explored. I'd be happy with how much I saw, and I'd be happy with the amount of time I spent in photo mode. You know what I'm saying? Like it's I'm okay with that. Like, and I think people have different opinions on this. Obviously, some people would probably want longer stuff, but I would rather compromise. This is alluding to a larger issue, but I would rather compromise content for the health of the developers making the games.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's a gamble, and that's a gamble I would take at any point when it comes to making money or whatever, generally. But it's still, but there's a strange contradiction in what we're saying, I think. And that is that we want shorter games, right? We want shorter games, but and we want more innovative games. But is that a lot to demand from the AAA space? In the way we are asking for it? do we want the AAA space to become indie? Like, what really are we talking about here? Do we want the corporate cultures to become startup cultures, like the trend we're seeing in tech right now? Like, do we want that to happen in the games industry as well? Like, what really are we saying we want as gamers and as game developers?
That's a tough one.
Yeah. So there definitely is a contradiction there. Like, you're absolutely right, and it kind of comes back to a previous podcast. Like, players trust their players, but they don't really know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're landing on that right now. It's like, what do we really want, and what would that actually look like?
Yeah, topic of deep reflection, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, if they made Ghost of Tsushima, but it was just the open world and the haikus, I'll play that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just play Haiku Tsushima any day. Like, I legitimately would. Like, that's a game I would play.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We recently observed the massive growth and outburst of an indie game called Fall Guys, which just came out. Blowing up on Twitch, blowing up on Twitter. Small indie game published by Devolver Digital, and made by Mediatronics. And it's the only thing people are talking about right now in the games industry, right? And we're seeing it probably make hella money. So, like, that's something to keep in mind. Like, it's also possible for indie games to generate revenue, although not all of them do. Obviously, in the indie scene is hard. You make it or break it often, and Fall Guys made it. It just kind of blew up.
Yeah, they have something like 1.5 million players first day.
Yeah. But you know, I do wonder, like, if more indie games were able to enter that spotlight in the same way as AAA games do, then would that solve the issue? I know that Xbox is doing, like, the whole Xbox Indies. I know Nintendo's doing the Nintendo Indies, right? These platforms to kind of raise indie developers up. But is the segregation of indies from AAAs the reason why we're seeing, like, almost like a classist divide between games being made? Would it if all games were just games and there was no classism involved or based off of revenue and input money, would that aid anything? And again, I don't know the answers. I don't pretend to know the answers. Yeah. I'm asking questions to kind of provoke some more thought. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Seeing, yeah.
I feel like a game having an indie versus a AAA take, like, it provides context a lot of times. Like, if we're talking about Fall Guys, when it released yesterday, those servers died hard for quite a while, and it's an indie game, so that's almost expected. But if Fall Guys was a AAA game and it had that kind of server death, what would the narrative be at that point? So if AAAs and indie games are all in the same space and they're all viewed exactly the same, would Fall Guys have the same support and people being okay with having servers dying? Because there's no differentiation that, oh, it's an indie game, we can excuse that. So
yeah, solid point.
In some ways, it could hurt.
Yeah.
Solid point. Yeah, I agree. So I think this also kind of comes to talking a little bit more about the online shops we use to buy our games. And I want to talk about the Nintendo eShop just a little bit, because as garbage as it is, it does one thing really interesting. It does not, unlike the PS shop, and I don't know, I haven't used the Xbox shop much, but the PS shop at the very least, it doesn't put the AAAs at the forefront,
right?
Like, purposefully. It segregates very cleanly by most sold, what's on sale, what's hot, right? And there must be some kind of system to kind of get your games into those lists. Yeah. But it's awesome for me to see stuff like Kentucky Route Zero on the same page as Breath of the Wild and beside it. And and getting more eyes on it that way, right? That's pretty cool to me, I think, personally.
Yeah.
So I think there's merit to that as well, in the sense that the player bias of it's an indie game, I'm not gonna get much out of it, so why should I buy it? Like it's
Yeah.
you know, it's like everyone judges way too hard and way too quick, and I feel like breaking down those barriers might be an integral step in onboarding onto indie.
Yep, that's fair.
One thing to point
There's
out.
also another argument. Sorry, go ahead, Shashank. Yeah.
One thing to point out is that with AAA titles, you expect to pay like $60 or $80 now, but for an indie game, like 25 is kind of pushing it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And I think as consumers, we're sort of conditioned to think like, oh, if I'm paying $60, I want as many hours for my money, right? And so that kind of pushes devs to be like, our game you can play for 200 hours, pay us, right? Versus indie games, which are like, oh, it's like a nice 15-hour game. Oh, you don't want to pay $30? $8'll do.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about this is that I can't get my mind off this little mobile game called Florence. Is it a game? It's more like an interactive fiction. But like, it's not really a game. I think Florence is a game. But like, it's close enough. And so for me, it's like, to continue the joke, it has as much choice as The Last of Us 2. Last time making this joke, I promise.
For this
Naughty Dog, if you're watching, I don't mean anything by it. I'm just memeing. Please hire me. No, I'm kidding.
Neil Druckmann is fuming.
Neil Druckmann is fuming right now. Oh no, Troy Baker, I'm sorry.
He's one of the like 5 people that actually watches this podcast.
But like, Florence is like this, you know, $5 game on the Play Store, and you can get it, and it's just a short, like 20-minute experience. But it's such an emotional experience. When you're playing the game, you're just feeling things, man, like for like 20 minutes straight, you know? And it's like, when you're playing like AAA games, you have those moments in between the real emotion that you're feeling where you're just doing nothing really, or like, you know, you're exploring and doing fetch quests and shit like that. Like, I almost don't need like the random hours of game that I'm getting out of, you know, those elements of gameplay. I personally, I play games. Social interaction is very important, but also for the feels. I love playing games for the feels. And when games deliver those feels like consistently and when I need it, I'm like, bruh, this game is set. This is one of my favorite games of all time. I know that if I sit down and play Journey for an hour or two, if I sit down and play Journey for an hour or two, I will get the same level of feels like always. That's how I look at game development. I always think of, as the player is playing this experience, what are they going to feel? And that's how I approach game development generally at the very start. And that's how I discover the vision for the game as I go along.
Yeah.
And you know, like that's all I really want from my games. Like, if I'm doing cool mechanics and feeling really cool, that's an added benefit. But that kind of lends still into that emotional aspect of things. And so I think the games industry, and I speak as someone who hasn't worked in AAA before. I think the games industry can learn to design from a more emotional standpoint. There's a great book by Donald Norman called Emotional Design, which discovers some very like base level concepts that describe emotional intelligence and describe emotional design. And I think that the games industry can borrow some of that, like without an issue. I think there's a difference, right, between content bloat and meaningful content. And I think that's a place where AAA games can really take stuff out of and make it more of like a solid crunch.
Right.
Crunch as in the texture.
Yeah. I definitely get that. To bring it back to the Kojima talk I was having earlier and like surrealism. I think surrealism is best used in order to set the mood of the audience. When I used it in my play, it was sort of to get the audience on edge. They're like, "Oh, things aren't real. What's happening?" And that helps push the narrative, right? I feel like, and this is kind of going into a bit of a tangent, so
we've been on like 50 tangents already.
Yes, we've had 8 episodes so far.
Seems proportionate. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that if you want to have people feeling something, and I'll try and bring it back now. Innovating with your mechanics is a very big part of that. Because if you have a very compelling story, but your gameplay is just garbage, people aren't going to be that invested, because they'll be taken out of it by what they can interact with in the system, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah. So
sorry, go ahead.
With smaller indie games, a lot of them will not quite have one narrative, but will instead be atmospheric pieces. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but like with Baba Is You, it's all about the puzzle solving and like the feeling of you being able to solve stuff, right? So the mechanics really lend themselves well to that. You have to literally make your own solution by breaking down what you might think initially about how you can interact with the system.
Kind of building off of that point, have you guys played Tetris Effect?
Yeah.
No.
So Tetris Effect is Tetris in VR. And I just kind of want to look up its Tetris Effect budget. I want to look up if it's a AAA title or not. Because if it's a AAA game, it goes to show that you can very much develop a AAA puzzle solving game and have it be fucking amazing. Right? Like I played Tetris Effect, and I suck at Tetris. I'm terrible at Tetris. But holy shit, that experience I will never forget. It was so stimulating. Like it was just amazing. I can't find the numbers here, but I'm trying to look for it. Reception.
Yeah. Anyone at home,
here.
if you have some way of playing VR, try Tetris Effect. It is an experience in the purest sense of the word.
Holy shit. It's such a...
I really need to try it because I love Tetris, and I poured a lot of hours into Tetris when I was younger.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those big games that I had to get to.
That game,
assuming I ever access VR.
That game really handles flow very well.
It does, man. I could write an essay on that shit. Like, holy shit. Yeah, it's really, really good. Okay, I can't find the development cost for Tetris Effect right off the bat, but I'm sure that a game of that scale is definitely has had some development money in it. Like
especially as
in
a
the millions,
VR game.
easy, right?
Right.
As a VR game, yeah. probably in the millions. I'm definitely assuming like tens of millions. I would say. So like so you can have games that are effectively puzzle solving games with their mechanics, and Tetris Effect is very innovative in the way it delivers the experience.
Oh yeah.
Unlike any other Tetris game I ever played in my entire life, any other puzzle game played in my entire life. Forget about Tetris, just Tetris games. Like it's, I have never had more fun playing a puzzle game in my life before. Never. Even though I'd like barely finished levels. It was generally just a beautiful experience. And then you have like, so yeah, I mean, you can have AAA titles that innovate upon the mechanics and the experience in general. And I think you're right. It's an important part about with how they push their mechanics and push the medium forward. Spider-Man PS4 did such a good job with its traversal mechanics. That I think that is where it really pushed the boundary.
Yeah.
Game design wise. And the combat of it, yeah, it feels like Arkham, like a hybrid of Arkham and something else. So you can be influenced by other mechanics, other titles, but can you adapt it and change it so that it takes on a different form? And that is a real challenge. And again, we mentioned a lot of great points as we talked, about risk, about the contradiction that we mentioned, and everything else. Like, always come into effect. It's a very complex issue. But I still feel like at the root of this, there's a really hard problem, and I think the hard problem is how do you develop sustainably in AAA with a large budget, while also innovating and pushing the medium forward, and that is the crux of that is the one statement problem.
Yeah.
I do want to mention before I ask like a little bit of a joke question. Control is a great game. Control by Remedy is a very innovative AAA title, and everyone should play it. It's so fucking fantastic. But that aside, I wanted to ask you guys if you guys have played any AAA titles that have been a total waste of your money.
Oh boy. I need to think on that.
Yeah, I know there's been some, and I'm 90% sure they've been Ubisoft titles, because I know I have a bunch of games on Uplay and I never open Uplay.
Yeah.
And I think that's awfully telling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
Um.
Their formula is so boilerplate, it's ridiculous.
yeah,
But hey, that's how they push out their yearly games, you know?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for sure.
The first proper Ubisoft game I played was Watch Dogs, the first one, on PC at release. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would cover it.
That explains a lot.
I won't say it wasted my money because I didn't actually pay for it. I got it with my GPU back when they were doing that deal. Did it waste my time? Possibly. I had some fun with it, but it kind of dragged on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a period of time where I was having a major JRPG itch. Because I finished Valkyria Chronicles 4 and I was like, oh man, I really want to play like a nice, JRPG, which is I think the context of this entire discussion has happened in the West. Just to preface, I think we are not literate enough about the Eastern development scene to really discuss and talk about what's happening in Japan, or in China. So I'm not gonna say that anything we discuss in this episode has anything to do with China and Japan, because I think those are totally different places, and different development contexts and whatever. But I want to play a JRPG. So, I said I've heard a lot of great things from my friends about Kingdom Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that the day after I said that to myself, they released the Kingdom Hearts collection before the release of Kingdom Hearts 3. So Kingdom Hearts 3 came in the package. So I think it was a total of $120 for all the Kingdom Hearts games.
Yep.
I said this is gonna be an investment. I have like $120 to spend, and I'm probably gonna get like God knows how many hours of gameplay out of that. So yeah, let's do it. And I purchased it, and I played through 20 hours of Kingdom Hearts 1, maybe less, 15 hours of Kingdom Hearts 1. And I said, fuck this. I'm not touching this shit ever. What the fuck is going on? Why am I floating so much while with a sword in my hand? Why is dialogue so fucking cringy? Why is mechanics so busted? Why can't I stand on a platform without fucking falling off the next second after nudging the fucking forward button a little bit? Why is the UI so garbage? Why is casting spells so hard? Like, what the fuck is this bubblegum spaceship shit? Like, I don't fucking care. Like,
Yep.
It's such a fucking stupid. People in the game server are gonna yell at me for saying this because I've probably insulted 1 million people in the world right now.
Okay, as a Kingdom Hearts fan, I'm gonna say, yeah, I get it. It's like we put in so many hours. At some point, we have to go like, no, it was worth it. It had to have been worth it, right?
I started. There's a boss fight where you fight Riku, and in Maleficent's palace, I think.
Oh,
and
that one.
I can't beat him.
Mhm.
I'm playing on normal difficulty, and I can't beat him. I can't. I quit the game,
Yeah.
and I haven't touched it since. It's been almost a year now, I think. So Kingdom Hearts collection, $120 down the drain. Sucked. Death Stranding, so far, big waste of time. I love what it does. Don't get me wrong. I love the way it melds audio to sound design and graphics and visual design and everything else. Great. Mechanically, waste of my time. So narratively, shit's gonna be a ride. I feel like I need to prep myself before I get back into it. Like just mentally ready myself for Kojima.
You're never ready for Kojima.
You're never ready for Kojima. So those are my 2 picks for this question, I think, so far.
Yeah. I think one game I feel like I waste my time on. It's actually a multiplayer game. It is Ubisoft, For Honor. I played like 40 hours of that game, and I felt like for like the first 20, it's like, oh man, yeah, I think I'm having a really good time. And then it occurred to me when I was like 35 hours in, and I was just like constantly getting mad at the game. It's like, I can't remember actually enjoying fighting any character. I enjoy playing my character, but whenever I see anyone else playing anything, I immediately get disappointed at how this match is going to go. So I'm like, well, now it's just a waste of my time. Why am I playing this?
Yeah.
I promised myself to never touch it. So
For Honor has a really cool mechanics. Has some really innovative mechanics. Yeah,
it does, but it's really annoying to fight all of the characters apparently for me.
I feel you. I was in the beta for that actually, and I got it tested out before it released, and then I played some For Honor. I'm like, oh, these mechanics are really cool. I got matchmade, started playing some online games, and I was like, fuck this. I'm going to training mode, and I literally spent the entirety of my beta in training mode.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny. I think they have like a story mode added too later on, but
they did, yeah. And the story mode is actually pretty decent.
Yeah. Which is why I think like games like the fuck was it called? Mountain Blade Warband. Games like that which kind of are loosely based, not based off, but based on For Honor. For Honor is based off of like kind of do a better job of embracing similar kind of mechanics to their benefit.
Right.
I love the fact that you have full control over like your actions as a warrior. I
Yep.
love close combat, and so for me, it's like that shit's really dope.
Mhm.
Thoughtful combat in with sword and shield. That's how it's meant to be, I think.
Right.
Although I love my hack and slash. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have time for an interesting story before we end?
Yeah, I think we got
I think
time.
so.
Okay. So today in the morning, I went ahead and I was doing a user test at work. I woke up at like 7:30. I used test at 8 o'clock. So I had to do the user test, and the user test was we were testing our application, which is a digitized version of the Mocha test, which is what Trump did with the person, woman, man, camera, TV stuff. So we're digitizing that test and trying to make it more accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so on that project, we were doing a user test for a prototype we made in Figma with a 9-year-old woman. And we did the test and we learned a lot about kind of having users who might have cognitive impairment on the larger side of things. And it was such a revelationary experience, man, testing with that kind of person. Like it really opens up your eyes to show you like how important accessibility really is.
Yeah.
You don't realize it until you met somebody who actually has those problems and those issues with technology. And then you're like, towards the end, and I was doing a questionnaire, like a standard questionnaire survey after the test to gather some data, and I was asking her questions, and there's stuff that she just wouldn't remember because she was having a declining function, and so she said something really, really interesting at the very end, where she was like, "I don't remember much," and and you could tell there was like a sorrow in the voice when she said that, and I was like, I was about to burst into tears like at the end of that test. Like it was so eye opening.
Yeah.
Holy shit, man! That was an experience. Like I'm telling you, working in UX is rewarding in more ways than one. Like it's when you get to interact with the users like that, and you get to really understand the plight of people who aren't as privileged as you or people not in your circles. Like you start to really realize the amount of power you have in your hands to make change.
Yeah.
It's
And I think it's really important for UX designers to recognize that.
yeah. I mean, any developer really. Like even writing code, man. Like if you're writing code on a daily basis, like your code can be used to really help these people.
Oh yeah.
Use the technology better and get used to life in a different context. I think that's a valuable place to invest your time. I've been like, I literally had to take a break from a computer at that point at the end of that test, and I had to take a break and I had to move and sit down on the lawn for a bit and just reflect and then come back inwards. Like it was today morning was wow. Yeah. Holy shit, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to share that story with you because I thought it was really, really interesting. So
it is.
Test your game, guys.
Yeah, there's so many different contexts where people view your game or your code or whatever differently. It's impossible for you to know it just by yourself. So get help. Find people to look from a different lens.
Mm-hmm. And on that usual note of Games and Philosophy 101, we can hop into Games and Recommends. Shashank, what do you recommend for today?
Okay, so since quarantine started, my parents and I have been watching a bunch of kids shows. Specifically Avatar, Korra, and the most recent one we finished was She-Ra, the Netflix one. So I'm gonna recommend narrative-based kids shows because, oh my god, are they incredible?
Would you call Shira? Would you call Avatar a kid show?
Yeah, hands down.
Yeah. Okay.
It deals with heavy stuff like war and genocide, but like it does
Political propaganda.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It talks about this stuff that kids need to know about, right? But it does it in a way that's not only very approachable to kids and very emotionally investing, but also it's just flat out good content, good media.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recommend trying out these narrative based kids shows. They're phenomenal.
You know, I almost don't want to call Avatar a kid show just because of the fact that like it does such a great job at bringing in viewers who aren't kids,
Mhm.
and it's so accessible to everybody. Like I was talking to a person who's like this, who's a middle-aged guy from the Asian subcontinent, and he was talking about how he's watching Avatar with his kids, and he just got into it, and now he's addicted, and he binge watched it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, man, the power of the heroes. But yeah, good recommendation. Good recommendation. How about you, Evan?
I think I'm gonna recommend a book this week. It's something I read last summer and I've recently been meaning to get back into and reread. It's by Clive Thompson. It's called Coders: The Making of a New Tribe and Remaking of the World. And it's kind of it's a history of computer science and the culture of coding. And it has some interesting insights. I don't agree with everything it says. It highly generalizes people, but it does have some interesting stories in it. Like one of the things that stuck with me was the person who made the Facebook like button still regrets it to this day. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a good book. Take it with a grain of salt, but I would still recommend it.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would recommend. So today I tried something. I've been trying to perfect the fried rice. And when I say perfect, I mean like what's the best fried rice that I can eat anytime and just be happy with it and be very satisfied.
Right.
And today I tried. Recently I tried adding. So if you drink alcohol, you can try adding a little bit of bourbon into your base for the fried rice with garlic and onion, and try using that as an interesting ingredient to add to the mix. And following bourbon using some chili oil. Dude, hands down, one of the best fried rice I've made in my entire life. Like, it's so good.
Interesting.
Nice.
Highly recommend trying out bourbon in fried rice. Other than that, I wanted to close off today's podcast episode by letting everybody know that there is a really cool game jam happening soon, particularly within Alberta. And it's called the Alberta Game Jam, and it's happening completely online. And you can find the itch.io link at, let me look here real quick. I think it's itch.io/jam/Alberta Game Jam, all in one word. It starts next Friday. So that's going to be the 14th of August, 2020. So, yeah, would highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
And taking part, making a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's so valuable doing game jams. Like, you learn more there than just by talking or anything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
then,
it only takes a weekend.
Yeah. And then when you do apply for that game dev job you've been eyeing, knowing the pain and sweat and tears you're going to put into it, you can show your efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By showing your game jam Game Jam props. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for us. Shashank, outro.
I'm not gonna say small podcast anymore. We're on episode 8 now.
Yeah.
We are a chill podcast because we sure are. But we
only talk about topics like political bureaucracy and
chill
and
stuff.
crunch.
But yeah, we love to listen to your guys' suggestions. So if you have any suggestions about, stuff that we can improve on, stuff that we're doing well, let us know. We're more than happy to include it in our episodes. As well, if you have any topics you think we should cover, we're all open to it, right? Yeah.
As long as it's not Last of Us 2 again.
Atty is banned from suggesting topics.
I've made my last Last of Us 2 joke.
We'll see.
Yeah.
On that
Don't believe
note, see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
See ya.